Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of our Diverse Stories podcast show. I'm your host, Miranda Orth, and this is Elliott Headley.
Yep, that's me.
That's right, and you have your retro TV.
Yeah, the return of the retro TV.
We used that in the very first episode, and it was very interesting. So we thought we'd bring it back.
And people liked it. People liked it too.
That's right. Today's episode is called Mentors and Mentees.
So
even though we both did separate documentaries, we have actually one mentor on the show today. Our guest is from Capilano University.
yeah, and she's the co-founder of the documentary program too. Our special guest is Michelle Mason from CapU.
Hi.
Did you really start this whole founding of the documentary program?
Okay. Well, I was hired in 2006 to help develop a documentary program that was already in place. It was a 2-year program run out of what was then Capilano College. And I myself was working on a second film, and I thought they were just hiring me to come in and teach sort of one course. And the next thing I knew, not only was I having my child, Nicholas, about 9 months later, but I was also asked to redesign the program with my colleague, Jennifer Moore. And so that's when we turned it into an 8-month intensive professional program.
Yeah, so the way I describe it is our experience documentary program over there. It's kind of like a crash course, Miranda.
Okay.
Yeah. If you did much picture of arts over there, it'd be like a 4-year program. So they're trying to crash that into one whole thing for 8 months.
Yeah. Well, as I've said in previous podcasts, I would have to, in I think 2 previous podcasts, I would have to have accommodations for that if I tried.
Yeah. Questions for us today.
Yeah, I'm curious about your podcast. First of all, I'm interested in the collaborative relationship, how it is working together, creating this, and what's your vision? Where do you want to take this in terms of audience and focus?
So basically, our relationship started 4 years ago. We were mostly actors and plays and all that. And then,
we call each other theater friends because otherwise people will mistake us for anything else.
Yeah.
We've been mistaken for being siblings.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, the theater is a great place to meet people. I mean, it's a wonderful metaphor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And and then Elliott, when I first met Elliott, he was busy at CAP, right? Doing that degree. And we basically have been doing plays together before this whole thing shut everything down. Plays like Skits Outrageous. We had a few different skit roles that Elliott and I each did. And then we also went to other places like New World Theater. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yep.
On William Street.
Yep.
And then we did a bit of acting there, and then we just decided to keep being friends, even though I moved, and so in 2 different towns. And the idea of this for us is to prevent labeling any further than it has already, with my thinking of the fact that people are just gonna have their view on us, thinking like, we're intellectually challenged, so we don't have a lot of skills in anything, right, Elliott?
Yeah.
That's a typical thinking.
That's why for me I chose to do filmmaking, because tons of people with disabilities don't have that opportunity to be filmmakers or be a chef, be anything they want. They're just labeled.
Right. So all the obstacles in the way of pursuing our dreams because of prejudice.
Yeah, that's right. And disqualifying to find a volunteer position you want to do. Or when you're trying to live independently of like a caregiver or something like that. Like you don't always need to live in some people have to live in a group home or with their parents or other caregivers when there's no choice. But that's kind of labeling because that's in a sense of like not having independence to be free all you want to do.
So this is a program about human freedom then?
Yeah. Trying to shed light on this stuff and like make people see hidden away, not being seen at all for a potential of what we could do with anything in life.
Well, it sounds inspiring. I'm really honored to be here today.
Yeah. So what do you think about this whole podcast, Thematic?
Well, I think podcast world is a little new to me. Of course, I come to all this originally actually through journalism, news, and then into documentary. And I feel like I'm so busy with that and teaching that I don't have time to listen to podcasts on top of everything else. But, as I've been discovering this whole new realm, it's, I think as you're exploring, it's a wonderful space in which to inform and inspire, but also foster community without the barriers that tend to come with private media. Full way to democratize our media and represent ourselves. Absolutely, as you just said, Miranda. If we don't find that mainstream media is representing us in our whole selves and in ways that then can give other people permission to be themselves. We have a really toxic media right now, as we've seen, and so I think these kind of pioneering efforts are really important.
Yeah, it's the same with filmmaking. Like when filmmaking first started in the 1800s, it was just like a gadget. It wasn't like very that popular before. But when people who pioneered filmmaking said, let's just make a new media, so instead of a newspaper, we can inform people with visual art.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because it is definitely the creation of the photographic image, and then the scientists that found a way to create the optical illusion of movement, that is the cinema, that gave us a new way to see ourselves for the first time. Not some painting of a king or some religious figure, but Miranda, when Elliott and I had school together, we looked first of all historically at some of those paintings from the 19th century, where particularly in France, artists were sort of getting out of convention and traditional ways of representation, and getting out of the studio and going out into nature, like Claude Monet, Cézanne, and so on, and painting the ordinary world and showing how beautiful it is. And I guess it's not that surprising that as we became more democratically conscious, people really embraced the cinema as a way to see themselves in a new way and to dream beyond the limitations of traditional society.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I also, not just for Elliott, but I also did a documentary with a different mentor. It was called Rider. And the mentor I had was from Emily Carr, and she worked with me on it for, I think, as I said earlier, previous podcast, but like 4 months or so in 2019. And we did it in black and white. We wanted to come up with ideas that were kind of like unique to, unlike what most documentaries look like. Most are like in color like this, right? In this type of setting here. Or on a just basically typical TV coloring. So we wanted to make ours look like it was back in the old days, yet a little bit of modern as well. So because the idea was that it was of me being the writer, preparing for writing a lesson, and flipping through photo albums that I have in my office of like back and forth memories of me and when I was younger and running stuff I do and things like that. So we just thought, oh, we'll use this stuff and other childhood things like special shoes I had for my feet when I was a kid. And so was the idea for it was experimental for trying to get people aware that like they're really.
Why do you two think that that's the way you were received socially? Why do you think people react that way? Is it a fear, or what is it?
The public doesn't always seem to think that we can like have potential to have jobs. It's us as intellectually challenged people feel it's more of a problem.
We are also trying to help people during this time too, during COVID times, trying to have some hope. Besides if they have disabilities or not, we're trying to show them they can do other things than being bored that day.
Well, it's interesting, those points from both of you, because, you were asked, one of the first things you asked in your first question was, about some insights or experiences I've had as a result of the pandemic. And I think if the pandemic's taught us anything, is that none of us can manage alone.
No.
So, there's all these kind of interesting role reversals going on. And I do though counter that assumption that people still think that people with various kinds of disabilities can't participate in the mainstream society. I think that's changing very quickly. Just the fact that Elliott came to a university film program, and of course, filmmaking is it involves physical labor. You have to carry tripods and cameras and so on. And he and his class were able to work together and realize the various needs they could fulfill as crew. And it's really just a pretty simple pivot to include among those, many and various needs that a film crew and a film production needs is, some inclusion, some flexibility around maybe who's carrying the tripod and camera so that everybody can be part of the story. A lot of the businesses that I patronize locally, I try to go to just local businesses, obviously also because of the pandemic right now. And I find there are people working in those places with various kinds of abilities. So I think the world is opening up just by virtue of you two, having the independence to have your own podcast and have these kinds of high level conversations.
When I was at Cap U, it was a bit tricky because people were, can you hold the camera? Can you do these certain things? I said, yes, I can. It's just I've certain limitations, as you said. But it takes time for people to grow when they don't have the right skills when they begin filmmaking.
That's right. And you were asking at the beginning of the program, and one of the things I noticed early on was how many different kinds of learners there are. And I did a master's degree, but this was all in first literature and then journalism. So I wasn't trained to be a teacher. So it was really intimidating at first. And so I had to, just by way of humility, I had to be really open to who was in front of me. And there were only 7 students, this emerging filmmaker, storyteller, where they're at, and kind of draw them out. And wherever they're struggling or need help, then that's, where we try to fill in the gaps.
Me working on this podcast and working on a couple of other projects. One of them is a music video.
Great.
Working on, so I'm doing that.
Your other passion?
Yeah. I've never done that before, so it was the first time of everything.
Oh, good.
Besides me and Miranda, how's the school doing? Now that
Oh, that's a nice question. We've been in a pandemic trying to run an applied film program, or many applied film programs. And it's been really hard, actually. I think particularly for the students who, some of whom are spread around the world. So, I've had some, when we didn't have in-person classes in the fall, I had students tuning in, from totally different time zones.
Oh man.
And then there's, connectivity issues. And then one of the things the JOC program was able to do was to kind of pioneer an in-person model, because we just had 15 students in the program this year. So with that kind of small a cohort, we could use 2 studios and follow all the social distancing protocols. So we unwittingly kind of created a model that then in the spring, the motion picture arts students were able to use, so they could actually do some in-person learning. And then I think for the faculty, it's just been an unbelievable learning curve. And so now here, sort of end of April, which is the end of a university term here in British Columbia, everybody's rather exhausted. But we have our final screening for the documentaries and the motion picture arts films this coming week. So
that's good.
I'm really excited to see how everybody did. In documentary, one of the things that we worked from is John Grierson, the founder of the National Film Board of Canada, if you may remember, Elliott, he described documentary as the drama of the doorstep. So that's literally where we began the program. In September, I had my first story class on Zoom, and I said, okay, everybody get up and open your door. And what stories do you literally see outside your door? And because as I learned in journalism school, there's no such thing as a bad story, just bad storytellers. So we were able, documentary, I think you're able to adapt more to a pandemic, and it's a very documentary moment. People want to know what's going on in real people's lives.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, there was a documentary thing that the program Ellie and I met at had done, and it wasn't a joking matter type of documentary. It was about how a few people were sitting around separately, and one of them was sneezing and showing what it's like to kind of like be in this type of setup of sitting around in a park separately, social distanced. And they're like, "Achoo, achoo," and then everybody else is running away. And then another segment is about where they're eating popcorn. They can't really because they have masks on.
Yeah.
It's basically called Pandemic Moment. So various strange things like that kind of indicate, yeah, okay, how we're living right now is no joke, right, Elliott?
Yeah, but we also have merch.
Yeah, we have these 2 T-shirts.
Merch. Oh my goodness, where can I buy one of these, you guys?
Elliott, you know the answer to this one.
Well, right now I am trying to connect a few people and saying, can you make some of these shirts?
Great. I've got some sources.
Yeah, and we're going to.
Beautiful.
Yeah, we have a website so you can listen to our podcast and also hopefully make a store there.
Great. Get your T-shirt, everybody.
Yeah. What do you think about documentary in 2021 right now?
Well, I mean, we've all been, watching some kind of streaming platform or another. I wanted to respond actually to Miranda's comment because, I read a few months ago that the Dalai Lama was asked about the pandemic and how he felt about it. And his first response was that people are living in so much fear. And I really thought about that. It's like, yeah, like to the film you were describing, it is frightening, but I think we really need to overcome those fears because people are taking them to really extreme places, as we saw in the United States at the start of the new year and so on. And that's not going to get us through. I read a story. I can't remember if I shared this with you, Elliott, but apparently during the London Blitz, when the Nazis were bombing London, it was really interesting how after the war, it was surprisingly low levels of what we today call post-traumatic stress disorder. And I guess, psychologists and other experts that have looked into this phenomenon of why there wasn't greater trauma from that, blitzkrieg. They found that the fact that the British used the underground railway system, the tube as it's called, for people to gather, and they would give them a cup of tea, a blanket, and someone would hold their hand. So tea and sympathy.
Yeah.
And it just calmed people's nervous systems right down, and they didn't get PTSD as much. And I think, if we could all just use this time we have in isolation to really learn to center. I mean, that's what I've been working on personally, is like, how can I be a sort of calm presence in the world, and that'll inspire other people to maybe calm down, or to model that to my son, because we will get through this. Like that wonderful old British man that raised so much money, was his Captain Moore, Tom Moore, I believe.
Tom Moore, yeah.
Yeah, he said, the sun will come out again. And he should know, he lived through a terrible chapter of history.
Yeah, 100 years.
And it brings us back to ultimately the point of your podcast, is as you uttered it, Miranda, which is to help people get over their fear of the other, of people that are unfamiliar to them, or I can't help but feel in my work with people with disabilities. My first film was about a village to help children in Vietnam with disabilities, and over there, they're way behind on attitudes and opportunities for people working with disabilities. And so this village I made a film about was trying to change that stereotype. And so, I think part of, I thought a lot about this at the time I made the film, which was 20 years ago. But, when I would talk to people, it seemed that it was that when somebody sees a person with a physical, or as you described it, intellectual disability, it makes them feel vulnerable in themselves, because why else should we really care? I mean, we should care compassionately, but you know what I mean? Why should it bother us?
Yeah.
Usually that's a reflection of the person that is feeling bothered. So I guess that's the other thing to reframe on this program, is it's like, with the audience, that they're uncomfortable with someone living, working, dreaming, with whatever their disability is. We're all going to be disabled at some point in our lives.
That just sounds very nutty to me. Yeah, that's strange. That's strange that people would be like so vulnerable enough that for a prospective employer, for example, would kind of say, we're not very comfortable dealing with first date or something like that.
Have you had that? Have you had people say that?
I've had problems with that. Yeah, I kept being rejected at every job search I tried. And one person even said that even though this person herself was sympathetic to the condition I have, and epileptic condition I have and stuff, she still wasn't comfortable dealing with such thing.
Are you comfortable sharing what those symptoms are?
Because I was diagnosed with epilepsy at birth.
Right.
I've been developmentally delayed. I have a developmental delay learning type of disability because I don't work very well in the classroom setting. Like, I receive services from what's called Community Living BC. And so when they tried in Vancouver, when I tried to get a job, it felt like there was a competition every time they would learn about my epilepsy, it would just, no matter how long I've been free of seizures for, which is about 2.5 years so far.
That's great.
Yeah. They still won't accept me.
So they're scared you're going to have a seizure in the workplace.
Yeah.
That's what it's worth. You know, when I was growing up, my dad was a pharmacist, and I would help at the pharmacy on Saturdays. And of course, some of our patients could potentially have seizures. And so, you know, I took basic first aid, and it's pretty simple what you do. You know, you roll, what I remember is you roll a person on their sides, make sure their tongue can't get caught in their mouth. You know, make sure they've got a blanket or something so they don't go into any kind of shock. And within a few minutes, it will pass. They might not remember what's happened. And so just give them some time and space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty basic, right?
Like I actually have brain damage too. So that makes things learning wise extra complicated.
So in terms of them, those are two different things. So one is safety.
Yeah, safety.
And one is training.
Yeah, that's where the brain damage problem is related to. Yeah.
And how does the community service organization you mentioned, how does it support that training so that it's, you know, less onus on the employer? It seems to me, Elliott, that when you've told me about the program, there's a lot of support there, no? Or is there a gap that needs to be resolved?
The Living BC, for example.
Oh, that one.
His experience is probably different from mine.
Well, for me, it's okay. It's just sometimes when like you get a job, you have to explain yourself. And for me,
it's about disclosing. Part of it is.
Yeah, like for me, it's been like 10 years now since I had my last teacher.
Yeah, yours is definitely way more controlled than I wish. Yeah. I wish mine was as controlled, but unfortunately, out the window, not as much. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's controlled right now, but yeah.
I'd be curious for you to invite some guests on the show that specialize in this, you know, maybe not just from here, but elsewhere in the world that might know of, you know, how such an organization in British Columbia might grow, or other resources that could be tapped into, or, you know, how you could be using this, or, you know, how we through the doc program and so on could just raise the visibility, reassure employers, or inspire them to consider diversifying, you know, their employee body in ways they hadn't considered before. Because it's certainly a time in this last year where, you know, we've all had the point driven home in the most brutal of ways that we need to diversify everything.
Yeah. And that should be this. It should be a learning lesson, even more so now for people intellectually challenged to allow public to have them come in or at least talk virtually on the computer or something, to some degree of like trying to help out. Like I have a new facilitator now, and so CLDC facilitator. And basically the idea of that is to have like help you organize a facilitator place at Work BC or something, for example. You would want that, and also an adult program, support worker program. You'd also want to go to maybe. So I've done that, and feel like I'm on the advocating stretch of continuing my advocacy about disability, stigma for people who don't really fully understand what it is. And since mine is so unique, it's pretty interesting to do.
Great points.
Would you like to tell your friends and classmates about this podcast?
Absolutely. We can put it on our doc Facebook page and other social media feeds.
Yeah. yeah, this.
No, because this is all about inclusion for people here, all angles.
Yeah.
Well, and I think, we only benefit as a society when we do include everybody, because everybody is unique.
Yeah.
Not just because of disability, also in ability. And I think, when we could create a society, a healthy society and a healthy workplace, to your final point, Miranda.
Yeah.
It's one where we all have a choice.
Yeah.
Where there's a choice for everyone. And so I look forward to tuning into further shows to hear, from some of your other guests about how we can get there. Thanks for including me today.
Yeah, welcome. The documentary things that Ellie and I are doing, especially mine, was done before this in 2019. So we were able to have it pre-screened, and Elliott did the music for me and my mentor. And the song was called Never Lose Hope, even though it's instrumental.
So our jobs for the website and the video stuff is I'm also doing all the editing on my side of things.
Great. On your own?
On my own, yeah.
Wow.
And
you've been in touch with Josh?
Josh is busy these days, but Miranda is my extra eyes, so she helps out with the editing sometimes. And Miranda does all the stuff for the website.
So that's a good workflow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're up. Okay.
And I check emails, and then sometimes I'll just let Elliott know about what email we get if it's suspicious to me and I don't want to answer first. I'll just call him and ask him what to do, and then he would tell me what it is we need to do, if anything. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is the nature of the feedback you guys have been getting on the program so far?
We've been getting things like it's fantastic and that we have great chemistry on camera, but I have a hard time believing chemistry on camera because that can mean anything. So I just say, well, we do it for fun as friends. I should actually be more specific than say theater friends.
I suspect that's exactly what they meant. You have a nice rapport, right? Which is what people want when they're watching hosts. There's nothing worse than watching a hosted show where, I mean, I don't know about you two, but I can't watch those pundit shows, where they're all arguing about the news. It just makes me so tense. And I don't feel informed. I just feel sort of bombasted. Whereas, when you have two hosts where there's a nice synergy and yeah, it's a more positive kind of exchange of ideas and thoughts. It's very
one of my relatives has actually said I'm a go-getter.
Oh yes, you are, Miranda.
One of my relatives, yeah, from in Australia, she told me that in an email. Yeah. And then a couple of friends of mine are really liking it. And a relative of mine in Kelowna, she's gonna try to see it with her daughter on Spotify or YouTube.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And most popular that Elliott gets is my laughter.
Yeah. People love her laughter super much. Yeah, when I originally came out with the idea, it was going to be me and other friends, but he bowed out. So it was going to be me and Miranda then.
Well, yeah, it's about diversity. It's good to have, some feminine energy here, Elliott.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we were going to have 3 hosts at one point, but then you said, just the 2.
Yeah. And also on our website, we have a donate button.
I was just wondering if you know, and your audience knows about the Doxa Documentary Festival. It's happening May 6th to 16th this year.
I don't think they know. I don't think my mentor has told me anything about that.
Well, it's a really great one to take in because, of course, they're having to stream this year. Mm-hmm. And so there's such an incredible range of documentaries from all over the world, including experimental, like you were saying, you make, Miranda, and then more traditional narratives and everything in between. And there's shorts, and they're celebrating their 20th anniversary. So it's a really special year.
20th anniversary?
20th, yeah.
That's a big number.
It was one of the first festivals in the world to commit to gender diversity. in
Really?
terms of programming.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So,
So-
they're interested in films about people living with all kinds of diversity issues, ableism issues, also like invisible minorities, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
so it's just it's a festival where you'll see the world as it is rather than the world sort of, you know, funneled through a gate of private programming like Netflix or something. So it's just a really it's a really going to a festival of any kind, you know, it's just a great way to see what's really out there because
Yeah. What my mentor and I did originally was we had a Excel spreadsheet of dates that things would be submitted by and stuff like that, and whether we view it online or go in person to see it. And since this thing has happened, we can't really go anywhere. So we were able to see this thing, see it online at the Victoria Film Festival.
well, exactly. Like I can't get to Victoria right now, but I could watch your film online. So there's always hidden opportunities in adversity, right?
first time when I did the documentary program, and we all had to like do a whole introduction to everyone.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And at first they were there like, "What's he gonna say?" To say what he does. I said, "Well, I have a teacher and this and this and this," and people were like, "We didn't expect you to say that."
Well, there you go, Elliott. It's the same inclusion gap that many people have, right?
hmm
And yeah. So and then some people are kind of overwhelmed once they hear about that. Classmates might be overwhelmed by that, and so they have to ask the teacher, or teacher has to talk to the student about what it is and stuff like that, and what type person has and what to do depending on the type. Because
Yeah.
it's not just the basic unbuttoning tight clothing
hmm
or anything like that. It's more like you're having to like make sure the person's calm, sure, and make sure they don't bang their head on rough carpet, on rough wood or something like that.
Well, believe me, I'm a 6 feet tall guy, and I've bumped my head so many times.
Yeah.
Well, that might explain a few things.
Have you been listening to our episodes?
No, I haven't.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. We have
I missed
6
you.
others prior to this one.
yeah.
Okay. Well,
Plus
Elliott
an
just sent
extra
me
one
the website. Is that where I find it?
Yeah.
there and on YouTube if you want to see.
I hope you have a good day, and maybe see you in the future.
Look forward to that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks so much for inviting me to. It's been really lovely to see you again.
You too.
Yeah.
Take good care. Stay safe.
You too. See ya.
You
Bye.
too. Right. Bye.